A deeply imperfect city, a city that over these last several weeks and months, media has described as one that is on edge. And you won't see any argument from me on that front. But there is another truth. We are a city on the precipice of extraordinary change and progress. We are a city that is collectively united around the change that has been prevented for generations and generations. We are a city that is going to make that change. We are a city that is hopefully an example for the rest of the world to follow. I want to thank George Floyd's family. Can't imagine the grief that they have been going through over these last 11 months and continue to go through right now. Daughter who's lost a father, family who's lost a son and uncle. That pain will forever be there, and it is a family that will forever be rendered incomplete regardless of the verdict that just came forward. This is a good day in Minneapolis. It is a good day in Minnesota, but let me be exceedingly clear. This is day one. This is day one. We've gone through 400 years of injustice, intentional discrimination, Jim Crow restrictive covenants that run with the land, and all forms of anti-blackness and structural racism that has impeded our black community. Now is the time for that change. Generation after generation, this measure of basic justice through our judicial system has been denied to our black community. That there will in fact be black residents in our city, in our state, in our nation that are stunned, in fact suspended in disbelief that the jury actually delivered this moment. Well, that reality in and of itself speaks volume for where we are. The trauma our city has faced, the trauma our nation has faced. The pain over this last year, for some we've seen drop by drop, a slow, steady, and unrelenting uncertainty. And for so many, it's been incalculable loss and solitude. For our black neighbors in particular, I know that the effects have been in so many ways torrential. The floodgates of 400 years worth of injustice hitting an entire community like a tidal wave. There's no playbook for navigating these difficult times, no personal discipline or good intention that will somehow blunt this impact. Justice has been rendered in this case, but we still have a long way to go to achieve true justice in our city and in our country. No matter your path to this moment in time, one thing is certain, and that is no resident in our city has been immune from the grip of grief over these last 11 months. I mentioned a minute ago that we've been defined as a city on the edge. But it is that precipice of change that we aim to define ourselves by going into the future. We're building a new and inclusive community as we speak. We're piloting new ways of policing. We're working towards alternative responses to safety beyond policing. And of course, we're working alongside our Chief Arredondo. We are a city that is capable of extraordinary progress. And what makes our democracy work, and what will make our community stronger, and what will ultimately inform our ability to honor George Floyd's life in both word and deed, will be our collective willingness to have that active participation in shaping our future. To make sure that the precision of our actions match the precision of the harm that was initially inflicted. Now is our time in this city. Yes, there will be challenges, and I know we will meet them together with a shared sense of purpose and abiding commitment to racial justice and an unmatched love for the city of Minneapolis. I want to take just a brief moment to, yes, again, thank the family of George Floyd. I want to thank the jurors, the witnesses, many of whom were city employees. I want to thank every single staff member that has worked so tirelessly for the city of Minneapolis over these last 11 months. It's a difficult state to be operating in some form of crisis for that period of time, and they have done it. They have risen to that challenge. I want to thank our community. Our community has stepped forward to hold us accountable. Our community has charged us with rising to see the magnitude of this moment. And I'm hopeful that we will indeed meet that moment together. Council Vice President Jenkins and Council Member Alondra Cano have joined us. They are council members that share the intersection through which George Floyd was murdered, at which George Floyd was murdered. And I would like to invite up Council Vice President Jenkins right now, who has been a champion in every way, shape, and form of the progress that we all need to see. Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mayor Frey. Good evening, everyone. Let me just start out with a little quote. It says, "If I am a criminal for advocating that people have the rights to defend themselves and to fight for what they deserve, then I hope that I am always known as a criminal." That was spoken by Robert F. Williams, the president of the NAACP in Monroe, North Carolina in 1954. My name is Andrea Jenkins, and I'm the Vice President of the Minneapolis City Council. I first want to just once again extend my heart and my hand to the family, to the friends, to the loved ones of George Perry Floyd Jr. Public safety system in this country, the inequities that our black citizens have been talking about for a very, very, very long time. Yesterday I heard a friend of mine, Reverend Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, say that we have 3 pandemics: COVID-19, racism, and COVID-19. White supremacy is at the very core of this country's founding. It's in the soil, it's in the water, it's in the very air that we breathe. But today, justice was served. Police accountability was handed out. It gives us a little more hope. Hope that has carried black people through the darkness and despair that COVID-19 has wrought. Hope to keep fighting for justice to keep struggling for fairness and equality. Hope that coalition building has new momentum. Hope that intersectionality becomes more than a buzzword, but a way of life. It is only through coalition building that we will once and for all end racism in this community and in this country. I want to thank those brave witnesses, my constituents who cried to the entire world and represented the pain and the anguish that every single Black American in this country is feeling. They made sure that they would hold Derek Chauvin accountable for his criminal actions. To my community, I love you. Earlier today, I did an interview and I was asked, what do I think George Floyd Square, the intersection of 38th and Chicago, means to Minneapolis? And I just want to say, I've been literally toiling at 38th and Chicago for well over 2 decades. I have long coined the intersection of 38th and Chicago the soul of this city. I think I can rightfully say that right now, it is the soul of this nation. And so, let's begin to rebuild our community in and around 38th and Chicago. Let's make it a beacon of social justice known to all throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President, for those powerful words. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are all joined by Councilmember Lene Palmisano as well. Councilmember Alondra Cano from the 9th Ward, who also borders the intersection at George Floyd Square. Councilmember.
It's been a long and hard year for Minneapolis. My name is Alondra Cano, and I represent the 9th Ward. Together with Councilmember Jenkins and Mayor Fry, we have been working extremely hard to support the communities that have been holding this moment for such a long time. There has been collective loss and grief in our city. There has been collective love and care for the people most impacted in this moment. And I deeply believe that we needed the answers that we heard today from the jury. We needed this glimmer of hope. We needed this sliver of justice. I believe that our pain as a community, and the pain specifically that has been happening and inflicted upon the African American community today, has been deeply acknowledged. That humanity has been deeply affirmed. And that struggle for justice has been completely expanded and shared throughout our country. I think together, as elected leaders, as community members, as parents, as people of Minneapolis, we are standing here to say that we are committed to not losing one more life under these circumstances. For me, this moment right now is about gratitude to every single person that has stepped up and into this moment. Tonight is about kindness. Do something kind to yourself, to your family, with your community. And tomorrow, as we think about Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center and Adam Toledo in Illinois, we open up our hearts to continue to walk down this path of justice, to hold hands together and meet these moments as a community. So thank you, Minneapolis. Thank you to the jury.
Thank you, Council Member, for your strength and leadership. And with that, we will open it to questions.
Would each of you be able to tell us how you learned of the verdict, where you were when it came in, and what was going through your mind in that moment?
So the question from Liz Navratil was whether each of us can describe where we were when we learned of the verdict and how we felt. You know, I'll take you a little bit further back, 11 months, to when I first watched the video itself. It was clear to me in the immediacy that we needed to see accountability. It was clear to me that the normal framework that's baked into the mortar of City Hall, the principles and procedures that tell you not to say anything or not to speak out, this was very different. It was also clear to me on that long walk over the Central Avenue Bridge that we as a city, as a collective, really needed to change. Fast forward 11 months, and I was standing in my office, the conference room at City Hall, with a number of our staff. You know, to say that there was a sense of relief, it would be a dramatic understatement. You know, we all wanted to see justice. We all wanted to make sure that, again, this was day one of the necessary change that we needed to see. And I think we all were nervous that what has happened on so many occasions through our judicial system where we wouldn't see that justice would happen again. I'm so thankful to those that were involved in the court system and the jurors, especially the witnesses. And I'm thankful to Attorney General Keith Ellison, who presented an extraordinary case on behalf of the prosecution. Council Vice President, Councilmember Cano, Palmisano.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Liz. I was ironically doing a class visit with a group of law students at Hamlin Mitchell University Law School. And it was a class, the first time that this class has been offered at the law school. It's a class on transgender law and policy. And so I was talking to these third-year law school students about issues, the attacks, the vicious attacks on transgender youth all around our country, including right here in the state of Minnesota, criminalizing people's identities, criminalizing people's rights to just basic human access, the bathrooms, schools, education, employment, housing, etc. And the little Star Tribune alert news flash popped up on the screen. And I was in the middle of an answer to one of their questions, and just became speechless. You know, I talked about a lot about what I think this verdict means, but you know, I think there was a sigh of relief, particularly, you know, when the judge first announced the verdict of the first count, second-degree murder. You know, I was like, okay, maybe this is going to be the end of it. And, you know, in many people's eyes, I think that would have represented some modicum of justice. And, you know, and in Minnesota, quite frankly, those are some of the kinds of results that people of color continuously see, little bits of justice, little crumbs. And so when I heard the second count, though, I was pretty excited. And then all counts, I mean, that is what the protesters have been out in the streets demanding. That is what people all over the world has been demanding. I got a lot of questions in the last couple of days about the comments of Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and that's what she was demanding. Guilty on all three counts. And so that's where I was. I don't know, Councilmember Cano, you want to comment?
Mr. Mayor, this is kind of an open-ended question here, but what's next for the city here? And what's next for the intersection of 38th and Chicago here?
I'll take each question here in turn. The question is what's next for the city, and also what's next for the intersection at 38th and Chicago. The intersection of 38th and Chicago indeed has multiple truths associated with it. As was being displayed for the last several hours, it is a critical and important location of racial justice and healing. It has been a very important location for which community can gather, both before as well as during this trial. And going forward on a permanent basis, we believe strongly that this should be both a permanent memorial to George Floyd, everything that he stood for in his life, but also a intersection where racial healing and justice is front and center in both the way the buildings and the infrastructure are set up, but also in the way that it allows for humanity to gather. Now, that is absolutely true. It's also true that this will and has been a very important transportation line planned for quite some time through our bus rapid transit system in the form of the D line. It is also true that neighbors surrounding that intersection have been subjected to far too much crime and violence over these last 7-8 months. The violence has been unacceptable. Everyone should have the ability to use their sidewalk, to have their kids play outside, free from, in a safe atmosphere. And so, moving forward, as the chief has mentioned, there will be a reopening of the intersection, but it is not a going back to normal. We're going to make sure that we have a bump out, a location for the memorial itself. We're going to make sure that we're doing everything possible to incentivize and encourage black ownership in that corridor itself through a combination of our commercial property development fund, which allows for patient capital so that our black community can own not just the businesses but some of the underlying real estate. As you know, we've also had some assistance that have gone out to several of the businesses that have been impacted over the last several months in the form of grants or forgivable loans. As for what's next for the city, transformation. Deep-seated change. change in the way our police department operates, change in the way our economy functions to make sure that our black community is centered not just at the table, but also as key beneficiaries of the work. And progress that needs to continue in the area of housing, which has always been a passion of mine. We could get into all of the specifics, and the specifics, believe me, are necessary right now. But we have a lot of change that will be coming down the pike.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Operation Safety Net, could you like to comment on how that went, and when might Minneapolis be opening up, pulling down some of the boarding downtown?
The question was about Operation Safety Net in general, and also with regard to some of the infrastructure that has been put up, some of the fencing around some of our key pieces of city infrastructure, notably City Hall, Hennepin County Government Center, some of our police precincts. I'll note that one of the big differences, there are many differences between last summer in late May and early June and right now. One of the biggest differences in terms of planning has been time. We've had time to prepare. Prepare in the way of establishing formalized agreements with our community members, and we have done so, making sure that we have 7 new contracts going out right now that are working at this moment with 7 different community organizations that are charged with both disseminating key information from the city as well as relaying us key intelligence as the nights and the days ahead progress. We've made sure to establish formalized agreements with neighborhood associations, block captains, neighborhood leaders, recognizing that there are moments when the best person to deliver the message doesn't necessarily work directly for the city and isn't necessarily myself. So making sure to empower those community voices has been a really critical component over these last several months. Indeed, there's also, through Operation Safety Net, been an increased presence in law enforcement, State Patrol, National Guard, and a number of our different mutual aid jurisdictions, and including our police. And we are appreciative of the assistance that has been provided throughout our city. And I fully recognize that to some there is a great level of discomfort due to the presence of law enforcement, and simultaneously, we need to keep our city safe. Both of those two things are true. As to the question of when will Operation Safety Net end, I imagine that it will be soon. I can't give you an exact number of days at this point, but I know we'll be in collaboration with a number of the different jurisdictions that are involved in Operation Safety Net itself. And I'll also note that Chief Arredondo, in fact, intended to be here, but the press conference itself got pushed back due to a number of different media reasons, and he's with the command staff as we speak.
Or how to change it?
The question from Ms. Navratil was, how does this verdict impact the question of change in this police department, or whether to
Replace it with a public safety department? We've heard some people want to get rid of MPD, some want to just change it. How does this verdict impact those conversations?
For my own purposes, speaking for myself, change has been long overdue regardless of the outcome of this verdict. Indeed, it's justice today, but we need to see justice tomorrow, and justice on Thursday, and justice on Friday, and continued. And we strongly believe that a big part of that is deep structural change in the way that our police department operates. And there are, of course, always differences of opinion as to what exactly that transformation, reform, whatever you want to call it, looks like. But, Chief Arredondo and I have issued a litany of changes to our policy, everything from overhauling our use of force policy to banning no-knock warrants in all but exigent circumstances, embedding a city attorney in the process to ensure that disciplinary practices are expedited as quickly as possible, and making sure that de-escalation is centered in everything we do, including the reporting structure itself. Now, those are just a few examples, and our office, along with council members with me here today, council members that are not here, have also worked very hard towards safety beyond policing, noting that not every instance needs a response from an officer with a gun. whether that's social workers or mental health responders. We all believe that those are very important components of the work ahead. And we also need police. We need law enforcement. Both of those things are true. And so as for the work ahead, that's been my position all along. It'll continue to be my position right now going forward.
Mayor, of course.
Yeah.
Oh.
So obviously we have this major verdict here in Minneapolis this week, but 2 days from now we also have another funeral in Minneapolis this very same week. So do you have any thoughts on these two pivotal things happening pretty much at once in our community?
Thank you. I believe that's Ms. Raditz.
Jokic.
Oh, I
With
apologize.
KSTP. That's okay.
Ms. Jokic's question was how these multiple different officer-involved killings have impacted the city and ultimately where we're going from here, given that the funeral of Dante Wright is coming very shortly. What happens in Brooklyn Center impacts Minneapolis. What happens in Minneapolis impacts Brooklyn Center. And we hope that what happens here in our state has a significant impact on the rest of the globe. I mean, the words that have been said, be they in churches, mosques, barbershops, or classrooms the world over, they've had an impact on so many people throughout our country, perhaps more than anyone could have expected. In so many instances, this has been a centuries-in-the-making reckoning around racial justice, and the incidents that happen, whether in Chicago or here, we should be felt. We should feel them quite acutely, and we know that they're especially felt and acutely by our communities of color. Yeah. So the question is whether there is a curfew tonight. There is not presently a curfew that has been issued, although that certainly remains an option on the table if necessary. That is not the desired approach, but it is an option that will be available if need be. Thank you, everybody.